At ParentingU, we believe a fed baby is best. This episode is geared towards moms who choose a breastfeeding journey. But whatever journey you choose for your family, we hope to be there to support you and help you along the way. Hi, welcome back to ParentingU. I'm Stephanie, and we're back with another episode helping you on this amazing journey we call parenting. And it's a continuation of a discussion we were having with Dr. Gregory Gelpi, a pediatrician with Our Lady of the Lake Children's Health, and Becca Miller, a lactation consultant and speech-language pathologist, all about breastfeeding. And today we're really going to talk about pumping. So what do nursing moms what should they expect? What is pumping like? And just all the resources and things that may come with that. So welcome back.
Thanks.
So Dr. Gelpi, as a pediatrician, tell us how you talk to parents, new moms, about breastfeeding and specifically pumping as it relates to breastfeeding.
Well, every mom has a separate story and a separate case as to how we would approach. But with all the moms, we try, number one, in 72 hours to start to get their milk in. Mm-hmm. By 2 weeks to get in enough milk to where the baby is starting to gain weight. The way to do that initially is mainly baby's mouth in her breast. Mm-hmm. And technically she would not be pumping unless they were separated at birth, for instance, if the baby is in the NICU.
Right.
Then she does have to start pumping. But usually the pumps work better after the milk comes in. Now, hand massage is different. We do recommend they do hand massage, and we teach them how to do that initially. Then moving forward, the baby is starting to gain weight at 2 weeks. Then we develop a plan. Is that mom going to be at home for 6 months, for a year? Is she going to go all natural? Or the mom is going back at 6 to 8 to 12 weeks. Okay, let's get a plan as to how you can be a working mom, and when you're separated from your baby, how are we going to manage to do this? And so that's where the pumping oftentimes comes in. Now, sometimes if they're not getting quite enough milk, let's say at day 10, day 14, we start instituting extra stimulus in pumping. So it is very important, we feel, because typically when they need a pump, they need it right there.
Yeah.
So a lot of times we, in the beginning, start talking about if you need a pump, what do we need to do and where do we need to get it?
Yeah, I think that's important. Like you said about, you don't have to know it all right away. So like you're already getting ready to breastfeed. You don't have to be thinking about pumping until 2, 3, 4 weeks after the milk has come in.
Correct. So like I tell the moms, let's worry about that down the road. If we get your milk in,
I love that.
it's a lot easier to pump.
Yeah.
Where if you don't get your milk in, we're always chasing our tail. We're to the pumps. Doc, I'm pumping all day. I'm only getting 20% of what I need. So if we can get it in naturally, then the pumps work better down the road.
Yeah. Well, and what may be some reasons why moms would pump other than being separated? Are there other reasons or approaches to pumping that moms can think about or be prepared for?
I think sometimes moms have a preference. Like they are weirded out about putting a baby to their breast, and I think that's a lot what we see. So they're like, oh yeah, I'll just pump and give them a bottle because they want to give the baby the breast milk, but don't want to go through A, the hurt, or 2, they don't have enough support for the breastfeeding. So they're like, let me have this, quote, easy button to still give them the benefits of breast milk without having to do all the work sometimes.
And like I tell them, Mom, my goal is to get your milk into the baby.
Yeah.
The only issue with that is, yes, that's a fantastic, because the mom doesn't want the baby to latch to the breast. She wants to pump and feed, which I say, well, that's great, but it's much more difficult. Now, if you can get your milk in naturally, then you can go to that plan.
Sure.
So I try to negotiate with them as like, hey, let's do skin to skin. Let's do some latching to get your milk, and then if you want to continue with that, then that should work out fine.
Yeah. Well, so what are some tips or ways to get prepared for pumping, either before baby is born or right after the baby is born or even further down?
I think a lot of the education is where it comes in. Knowing what breast pump to use, knowing that it's going to be a time commitment because you're going to try to do, baby on the breast and sometimes pumping to get supplemental breast milk. I think knowing what your expectations are as a mom and what you can do, like have a plan. Are you going to want to breastfeed for 6 months? Are you going to want to breastfeed for a year? Are you going to want to go to work after 6-12 months? Knowing that ahead of time will make your success with breastfeeding a lot better when you're actually coming to the point of, hey, I need to start producing this milk now.
How do you choose a breast pump? How does one go about it? I mean, I think when I chose one, it was just like what was the popular one, but are there any ways that we can approach that to pick the best one for mom?
So, I mean, first of all, just hand massage, but then there's actually the manual pumps, which you can have that too in case electricity goes out. But there's the pumps, the technology is getting so much better, and then you decide on what type of pump, and then there's all the way from just the pumps you buy at the store all the way to hospital grade pumps. So there's so many choices, and so sometimes word of mouth or, and especially the lactation consultants that work in the hospital are good with that as far as trying to do recommendations there.
Do you have any recommendations about types of pumps to use at certain times of how old the baby is? Like, is there something like better for when they're newborns versus when they're older, or is this kind of all what fits you?
I think it's all what fits you, and a lot now insurance are starting to cover pumps. So a lot of the time mothers default to what is my cheapest option to get a pump. But it's really preference. Like, do you want to pump both your breasts at the same time? Do you want to pump one breast at a time and try to feed the baby on the other pump? Is it manual like Dr. Gelpi was saying, or do you want an electric one? Or now they have those ones that you just walk around and put it in your bra, so you don't have to be hooked up to an electrical socket when you're trying to pump. It's a lot of mom's preference and what is more comfortable for them and feasible for them expensive wise.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about some of the details. So, how long should a pump session last? How long can breast milk last? Fridge versus freezer? How do we thaw breast milk? Talk me through the process.
So once they start getting the milk in and they start pumping, it would be similar to the frequency of that they would normally feed their baby that they would be pumping. So if the baby eats every 3 to 4 hours, at work they would pump every 3 or 4 hours. Breast milk, fresh, is good for about 6 hours. So they have a 6-hour window to feed it to the baby before they refrigerate it. Now after 6 hours, if you put it in the fridge, it's good for about 5 days or so. And then after that, depending on if you have a regular freezer on a fridge or a deep freeze, would be 6 months to a year. And so remembering that the live breast milk is the best, the refrigerated is next best. In the frozen, you do lose some things, but still the breast milk is much better than the formula. And so they have to make a plan as to when they go back to work to kind of start 2-3 weeks before to kind of start building up a little supply. For instance, if the baby would be eating 3 times a day when mom was at work, you'd say, hey, I need at least 12 ounces. So to get about a 3-day or so, 4-day, stash, staying ahead of. So it all depends, because some moms are at work and they can get the baby brought to her to breastfeed, but some are separated 8 hours.
Yeah. What about pumping colostrum in the very beginning? Some people have said, oh, I'm going to pump it, maybe save it for later, or when the baby gets sick, or like, does that help, or do we really need the milk to match the baby's stage of development?
So we call colostrum liquid gold. So technically, when you get it, we want to put it into baby's mouth right away. But obviously, it's good at any time, but the longer that it stays frozen, or it does lose some properties. But we try to get whatever's coming out of that baby, that mom's breast initially, to get it into the baby's mouth
right away.
Even the ones that are not breastfeeding or formula feeding, they're going to get some colostrum. So we say, hey, it's so important if you can get that into the baby's mouth. So, but no, colostrum is fantastic, and that's in the first 72 hours.
Do you have any other tips about storing milk? You mentioned on the counter, in the fridge, in the freezer. What about thawing milk? I think these tips are great, and I'd love to put those in the show notes so that we have those ready for everybody, just to have a quick cheat sheet. But what happens when the milk comes out of the freezer?
You definitely don't want to put it in the microwave. Putting it in the microwave will create uneven distribution of heat, and it could really burn the baby's mouth. So what we recommend is you put it in like some hot water for it to evenly be distributed. Or now you can buy these bottle warmers or milk warmers on Amazon for real cheap. And all you have to do is put however much milliliters you're having of breast milk, and it'll heat it up for you to the perfect temperature for the babies.
Wow. Okay.
The other thing is when back to storing it, you can store these breast milk for these babies for up to a year, and they can be used for a multitude of different things. When they have eczema, when they have eye infections, you can put the breast milk on their eyes. So definitely as a mom, don't feel bad like that you have this huge storage, because it can be put in the baby food as well to give them those added antibodies and the antioxidants that are in breast milk farther more than when you're just putting them on your breast.
Got it. Very cool. Well, what about the moms who are going back to work and are thinking about pumping, or maybe not even going back to work, but are going to start to be separated more from the baby? What are some suggestions, some tips, some advice for them as they prepare? Because pumping at work can be difficult, and it can be a lot of bags. That's what I remember. It's just all the bags. But what's some advice you could give to them?
So each case is different, but we try to strategize what will work best for that mom. So there's different things, because once the baby learns how to breastfeed off the breast, they really prefer that over, let's say, taking it in a bottle. So sometimes you can have some issues there where they don't want the bottle with the breast milk. They want the breast. So you have to work through these little things. And so kind of giving it a few weeks to kind of figure out how to do this, and also to kind of have a plan to, not worry about the whole picture, but let's take one day at a time and try to let's get through this day, because it can be overwhelming.
It can be.
If you're thinking, I'm going to be pumping for a year. So let's get one day at a time, because then you can work out the little idiosyncrasies and try to get it to where, it can become more of an everyday natural type thing.
Yeah.
And then also, obviously, that a breastfeeding mom has a right to breastfeed. And so that's very important to let them know, because many employers don't know the law. So we as healthcare professionals become their advocate, because it's very intimidating for an employee to tell their employer that, oh, you can't send me into the bathroom to pump. So it's very helpful if the healthcare professional knows the laws or who they can talk to, and then even talking to the employer, because if you talk to the employer and say, if your employee is breastfeeding, the baby is not going to be sick, and your employee is going to be at work every day. So usually when you present it like that, they're like, oh, I didn't know that. So they're more apt to say, okay, well, let's try to figure
the benefits.
Right, yes.
Yeah. Well, how often should moms pump when they're separated at work? You mentioned maybe about the same time that the baby would be feeding, but are there other tips beyond pumping to help keep milk supply up?
I think it has a lot to do with your hormones and how much you're kind of expressing. You want to make sure you're pumping every 2 to 3 hours. You want to make sure when you can or have the opportunity to put the baby back to breast that you're doing that to just stimulate your nipple to be able to produce the prolactin and oxytocin that you need to produce breast milk. And you want to make sure, first of all, that your flange is the right size so your nipple is actually being stimulated instead of your areola, because that's going to be the huge deterrent of if you're actually going to produce the milk that you need, or if you're not going to produce, or you're only going to produce half of it. The one thing you have to realize is that your pump is your baby at that point. And you need to pump every 20 to 30 minutes to make sure you are emptying your breast, because if you don't empty your breast, your milk ducts are going to think you're not wanting to feed as much anymore, and you won't be producing the milk that you actually need.
Interesting. I hadn't thought of it that way, but that's so true. That's so true.
So 5-minute pump sessions are not good, especially if you're going back to work. You have to pump how much you're feeding your baby to.
And also your breasts are designed hormonally to get the vibes of a live baby breastfeeding, where if you're just doing plastic, your body can start to kind of lose interest. So that's where it's so important to keep the stimulus going. And whatever your breast or lactocytes are producing, they continue to produce. So if you stop taking that milk out, the lactocytes will start to turn off and you'll start to lose your supply. So you have to keep it going.
Yeah.
And so it's it will stay going naturally, but if you're not pumping enough, you may start to decrease your production.
What about any of these kind of supplements, oatmeal, you've heard all the fenugreek, like kind of these things. Does that make a difference, or is that more meh? What do y'all think?
I think it's more meh.
Yeah, so there's a whole, they're called galactagogues, and these are any medicines that you would take to increase your milk supply. So technically it's old-fashioned, whatever you get out keeps coming out, but there are different galactagogues, phenylteve, fenugreek, things like that, which isn't proven but helps a little bit. There are some pharmaceutical agents that may help. One is called domperidone, but it's not FDA approved in the United States, so many moms get it from Canada. So it is believed to be very safe for a lactating mom, but it gets into a different category of can we safely get that for the mom. So, but really it's the old-fashioned way to keep the milk coming out, but definitely we try all these different things to see if we can get more production. A lot of times we'll get the moms to say, okay, today we're going to power pump. Let's see if we can get more milk out. And they'll pump every hour to see if we can get more stimulus to get more supply.
Yeah. So there's no magic pill, is what I'm
Right.
hearing.
Right. Yes.
Yeah. Well, that's good to know. And understanding the process just sets the new mom in the mindset of, I can do this. It's going to be a process, but we can make it through. Well, is there anything else that you want to share that new mom should know about plans to be a pumping mom, words of encouragement, anything like that?
I think if you want to pump, go for it. I mean, we are here for you. Lactation consultants can be reached at any time at any of our hospitals to say, hey, if you're hurting and you're pumping, we can fix it. Don't give up just because it hurts or you're having difficulties, because we can walk you through those. You can call any one of our hospitals to get a lactation consultant any time of the day or night, 2 a.m. in the morning when that 2 a.m. pump is not going well, and we can walk you through all of the steps. And don't feel bad because you're going back to work and you need a pump. That's a normal thing for mamas, and we will help you through that as well.
That's great. What about you?
So I think it's so important because breastfeeding is so important for the baby and for the mom that it is really her right that she should be able to breastfeed at work and pump at work. So I think if mom knows that, we as health professionals should be an advocate for her to help her to become successful.
So what may be some other reasons that moms choose to pump, maybe other than being separated by work? How can pumping be a part of this baby's journey?
I think a lot of moms have a preference that they would rather pump and feed the baby and know what they're actually getting. Maybe you don't know when you're putting your baby to breast exactly how much the baby is getting for a number of reasons. They could have a tongue tie, they can have a lip tie, they're inadequately latched on the baby, on the mom's nipple, so they're not getting enough milk. So pumping is a comfort blanket for some moms because they actually know, okay, my baby is getting those 2 ounces every 2 hours and don't have to stress about weight gain or anything like that.
So that's so interesting. So you mentioned that moms may be anxious about how much their baby is getting, and that's maybe why they choose to pump. But how do we know how much they're getting, and how can we be sure that it's enough?
So that can be a common concern that I don't know how much I'm getting, but as a healthcare professional, there's different things we're looking at. So like I tell the mom, you keep breastfeeding, I'll worry about whether the baby is getting enough. For instance, Once we get going, the baby is usually gaining about 1 ounce per day, about a pound every 2 weeks or so. Also, we can tell by baby's urine output and also the frequency of the bowel movements, the yellow mustardy stools, that we can tell that your baby is getting plenty of milk. So don't worry about it's natural. You're producing what the baby takes. Where if, let's say, the baby's not gaining weight or has not had a bowel movement, is like, okay, let's do a little pumping and let's see how much you're actually producing. Because one, is the mom producing enough? Two, the baby has to suck, swallow, breathe, and is a baby efficient enough to take that milk off of the breast? So there's many different factors that can be involved, but usually the healthcare professional can figure it out.
Yeah. I love what you said about you worry about this, I'll worry about this. And I think that's the power of having a lactation consultant, a pediatrician, all these people in your corner that really help you through a pretty new and sometimes scary journey. And so that's really powerful. Thank you for sharing that. And thank you for joining us. I loved having both of you here. Thank you for your time. Everything we talked about will be in the show notes, especially the storage guidelines for the breast milk. I think that's really important. And we're so glad you were with us through another episode of ParentingU, where we help you navigate this amazing journey we call parenting. We'll see you next time.